And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we have just wrapped up almost the Super Wild Card weekend, Laraib. We are filming this before the Cowboys Bucks game. Obviously, what we expect to be the most hyped game of the week, and even though we had some bangers in the past 2 days, so what we're gonna do actually is we're gonna drop this podcast on Monday. It'll drop somewhere around 6, 7-ish, so you can see it there. And then we're gonna do an instant reaction following the end of the Bucks Cowboys game tonight, and give our just instant reactions to that. And we might have a very special guest on as well, so make sure you're looking forward to that, Larab. But just before we get into anything, our picks. We as of now we've picked all the same teams. The only game we disagreed on was tonight's Bucks Cowboys game, so no reason to go through that. We were both 3-2 with we both did not pick the Giants, and we both did not pick the Jaguars. So but let's go ahead, Larab. You want to say anything before we hop into some of these topics?
Well, Lewis, first, a little sadness to start off the podcast. The Seattle Seahawks season has officially come to an end, Lewis. And it was a ride, right? It was a great Cinderella story. Geno Smith and all the guys just balling out. But we were just outmatched in that second half against the 49ers, Lewis. And for the final time of the 2022 season, I can hold up the DK Metcalf Tutty Ball one final time while it goes on to its resting place on the mantle, on the wall, Lewis. We played a great first half, had the lead. Just got ran off the field in the second half. And we'll talk about it, in a future episode about, some of these teams' future, how they lean towards the draft. Really, really hoping we get some big defensive stud with our top 5 pick, Lewis. But yeah, Seahawks season officially over. I'm a little sad, but I'm a little more sad about another team that we'll talk about in a little bit, Lewis. My favorite team in the AFC, because, the Seahawks team, I love the story, Lewis. I love my team, but, there wasn't that high of expectations, and now our season finally has concluded.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, it's amazing that you made it this far, especially with the preseason expectations, not really knowing who your quarterback was. I remember you were drumming up hype about Drew Lock at the beginning of the season, but obviously you're satisfied with Geno's performance this season. So yeah, I mean, just talk about the game quickly, because that game, it kind of didn't go as expected, because I expected just from the start the domination. But the Seahawks, they showed life in the first half. They made sure that it was a competitive game. They were leading in halftime with a very weird decision to kick a squib kick that kind of got lost by all the other dumb decisions by coaches this weekend. But Kyle Shanahan, that was a questionable one that basically gave the Seahawks 3 points and the lead going into half. But he quickly fixed his mistake by destroying the Seahawks in the second half. Unfortunately, it wasn't last score wins, because the Seahawks would have won the game. But yeah, great season. Obviously defying expectations. We didn't think they'd go this far. And, it was a fun game. DK Metcalf, playoff DK, as we're calling him now, he continues to impress. So you have some pieces there. Nick Bosa really wasn't that big of a factor. You had, eventually the line did kind of crumble, but it's a young offensive line, a rebuilding group. Excited to see what this offseason brings for the Seahawks, Larab. But let's go ahead and move on to some of the other games that were a bit more exciting this weekend. But let's go to the next game after that Seahawks 49ers game, Larab. We had a true playoff classic. Shades of Chiefs Colts back in like the first playoffs I ever watched as a football fan. I was a late bloomer, but I remember that game distinctly. Andrew Luck against Alex Smith and the Chiefs. Huge comeback by the Colts. But this game is arguably even more unprecedented. Down 27-0. The Jaguars come all the way back and win at home 31-30 last second field goal. Let's talk about the Jaguars first, Laura. What was the biggest thing or change from that first half to the second half that you saw with this Jaguars offense, defense, special teams, coaching, whatever, that led to them coming back and securing this victory?
I think the difference was, Lewis, just them settling down and calming their nerves. We saw Trevor Lawrence, 3 interceptions in the first quarter, 4 in the first half total. And they came out in the second half, Lewis, and, a lot of these teams packing in. But the coaching from Doug Peterson, always having the faith in your team and just, settling down, right? This is your season. It's all on the line right here. So let's just cool, calm, and collected. And they went out there and they took everything that the Chargers defense was giving them, Lewis. Joey Bosa had some bad, mistakes, taking off his helmet, some bad penalties. The defense, of course, starts giving up starts giving up huge chunks and wide open touchdowns to these Jaguars receivers. And, credit to Trevor Lawrence. I really thought he was going to collapse under the pressure, and he was proving me right in the first half. But in that second half, Lewis, he came out with nerves of steel and got it done on Saturday and remains undefeated on Saturday, Lewis.
Yeah, it's a big testament to Trevor Lawrence and his character. Just after so many mistakes, still being confident in himself and in his teammates having confidence in him, that he was able to go forward, not lose faith, and pull out a victory. But let's flip this game over on its side, because as good as the Jaguars were, in my opinion, the Chargers absolutely blew this game. I mean, you're up 27-0 already. That should be a game you win. But given the circumstances of how you got there, with 5 turnovers by the Jaguars, and you really only capitalized on like 3 of them because you settled for field goals. This Chargers team, their identity for the longest time was taking the risks, playing this modern era analytic football on 4th and 5. We trust our quarterback. He's going to go for it. And they would be the team coming back. It wouldn't be the vice versa of them giving up a blown lead. So, Laraib, I want to ask you, like, the Chargers collapse. I guess I just, like, what happened? Who do we pin this on? And what can the Chargers look at this team going into the offseason? Like, man, if we just would have done this game could have been completely different. Because they didn't turn the ball over. They didn't turn the ball over 0 times that entire game. Because usually in these games, when you're up a lot, it's the crazy turnovers. It's a big injury. It's something crazy. This game is just, they just lost it.
Well, Lewis, it is really, really difficult to put my disappointment into words right here. I start off this podcast saying, the Seahawks loss was not my biggest disappointment of the weekend. It was my guy, Justin Herbert, blowing a 27-point lead. And actually, it wasn't my guy, Justin Herbert. It was their offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, who is one of the stupidest offensive coordinators in the entire NFL. Just because his last name is Lombardi is the reason why he has a job, Lewis. And you talk about a game where you're up 27-0, and you think, Justin Herbert in the entire game had 43 passes thrown, Lewis, which is ridiculous to me when you only run the ball 23 times and you have a 27-point lead. It's ridiculous, right? So this is not even just the Chargers, Lewis, throughout the entire NFL. I've seen it this season and the past couple of seasons. Just time management from these coaches has been ridiculous. I mean, a lot. This joke has been overused a lot, Lewis, about, you pull some random kid who plays Madden. He has better time management than some of these head coaches, but it's not wrong. It is not out of. It's not.
And let me jump in real quick, because there's just watching this game. How many times in the Chargers in the second half where it's like you have the huge lead and you're letting all this time just drain off, or no, you're not getting all the way down, like chew clock, get all the way to the last second of the count and then snap the ball. They were snapping the ball with like 15, 20 seconds left on the play clock. Like, take your time. It came down to the last minute where the Jaguars had a chance. All that time adds up. So it's just one of those things, like, yeah, you're playing Madden. You have a big lead. You click RB, click chew clock. There's a reason you do it, so you can win a game like that. But go on, Laura.
No, it's just ridiculous. I need Brandon Staley. He needs to be out of there. Joe Lombardi needs to be out of there. I mean, it is so disappointing for Justin Herbert to go out there and have a performance like that. Just completely dominate in the first half. And they blow this lead. And even going back to last week, Lewis, when Joey Bosa gets hurt, he's not in key situations in this game. Mike Williams, he's one of those guys when like you said, they weren't able to capitalize on all those turnovers. If you have Mike Williams matched up with some of those lesser Jacksonville DBs, they're getting some touchdowns instead of field goals in that one, Lewis. And this is a completely different game. And we would have had Herbert versus Mahomes once again, for a playoff matchup this time. But instead, we have Trevor Lawrence in this Jaguars team.
Hey, that's still good.
I mean, Trevor Lawrence undefeated on Saturday, blah, blah, blah. But, it's a whole different league with these top 3 teams in the AFC, Lewis. And, it's just, in my opinion, not going to be the same game if if the Chargers were there. But, what is your thoughts on the coaching situation? I want head coach and offensive coordinator out of there right now.
I agree. And the most inexcusable, because I actually think Brandon Staley had a good game plan going into this game. He knew that without Mike Williams, or without these Jaguars receivers, they really don't move you that much. So he was like, he said, sit on the routes, get in their face. They're not going to beat you deep. And he had a really good game plan that forced Trevor Lawrence into a lot of mistakes, and it was working. But the thing about him was second half, the Jaguars, Doug Peterson, a battle-tested coach, a guy who's won big games, big playoff games. He adjusted. He found ways to get his guys open. He got Trevor Lawrence on the move. He established the run game to unlock the play-action pass, which really unlocked the Jaguars' passing game, and they did not adjust. They did not adjust the entire time. They played the same way, and you saw Zay Jones starting to get open. You saw Christian Kirk down the sideline. Evan Ingram was eating them up over the middle. There were just so many things where you're a defensive head coach. You were hired from a defensive coordinator position. This is supposed to be your specialty, and you have all these playmakers on the side of the ball who finally just got healthy despite you trying to injure them last week by playing them in a meaningless game. And then you come out here and, yeah, you pitch an awesome first half, but it's a whole game. You need that whole game to be perfect, and it wasn't. It was just a really bad coaching job. And, yeah, I think a game like that, plus the personnel decisions in Week 18, that's grounds for firing right there. We've already had questions about Brandon Staley this whole season. And, yeah, some of the guys in the locker room really like him. There's things like that. But when you have a guy, and like we're just going to rip off the Band-Aid, a guy like Sean Payton, who's on the market, a Hall of Fame head coach, and you have a quarterback with a talent like this, I mean, you have to use this opportunity because coaches like this do not come, just out of nowhere. When Andy Reid was let go by the Eagles and the Chiefs got him, it was like a godsend because he just kind of got tired of Philly. It just didn't work out. That's why they moved on. But he found his place in KC. He found his quarterback in KC, and it's like a dynasty, So I think this is the perfect opportunity for the Chargers front office. Fix your mistake now. Don't be stubborn. Don't be, stupidly loyal. Move off of him. Get the proven Hall of Fame head coach and move on. I don't get it, but what this team's doing, like you said, Joe Lombardi, I just think, when Sean Payton comes, he's bringing his staff. Joe Lombardi, actually former quarterback coach for the Saints with Sean Payton, but he had a very minor role. When you have Drew Brees and Sean Payton, the quarterback coach, what does he do? Just sit back and watch popcorn, eat popcorn. So there's not much for him to do. I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Chargers to really get, a really good head coach. Because in the division with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, you need every advantage you can get. So that's my takeaways from this game. I just think that, good for the Jaguars, good for Trevor Lawrence. Happy to see his progression. But Laraib, I chose to bring this part up last because I want to hear your response. Justin Herbert's also at fault here. He missed a lot of throws, and a lot of those red zone possessions where they got field goals instead of touchdowns to really stick the dagger into the Jaguars' heart early. He sailed balls. Like there was a ball to Keenan Allen at the back of the end zone. He just sailed it right over his head. There's a question here about Justin Herbert, a big game on the road. He missed a lot of opportunities. Now, is that just a reps thing? Because I saw the other quarterback who had an awful first half come back and backpack his team to a win, while Justin Herbert kind of let it go by the wayside.
No, I have to disagree with that, Lewis. I still think Justin Herbert was a better quarterback in that game. It's just hard to beat awful coaching when you have, two of the stupidest head coaches in the NFL like that telling you to, not chew the clock all the way out, not run the ball situationally. And when you score 30 points, Lewis, and you have a big lead, I will agree with you. He sat back maybe a little bit. He thought, this one's done for sure, right? We got a huge lead. Maybe I can, just relax a little bit. I had some bad throws. I'll agree with you, but it's also his first start in the playoffs, Lewis, on the road. So the nerves got to him just a little bit, not as much as Trevor Lawrence with his 4 interceptions. I'll tell you that much. But
4 touchdowns.
I like how this, the one silver lining from this game, Lewis, is that, Sean Payton will be the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers next year. Bookmark that for me right now on the First and Goal podcast. You heard it here first. Breaking news from Adam Schefter, Lewis. But, I got to ride with my boy Herbo. We'll see what this offense looks like. And like I said, without Mike Williams out there, it's a completely different, different type of game. We've seen Justin Herbert this year when Keenan Allen's out, when Mike Williams is out, when either one of them out or when they're both out, he's just a different type of quarterback, Lewis. But, talking about a team who did get a head coach and transform their franchise, Daniel Jones, Lewis, what a performance from him in the playoffs. Let's segue over to that game. We can touch on the Vikings a little bit, Lewis, but, this doesn't surprise us at all, right? A Vikings team whose defense is fraudulent, gave up 450 yards of offense last time these two teams matched up. And once again, giving up over 400 yards in this one. And so Daniel Jones, Lewis, the book was out on him the past couple of seasons, but now with Brian Daboll as a head coach, do you think he's the franchise guy over there in New York?
Do I think he's a franchise quarterback? No, I do not think he's a franchise quarterback. And I know that's the unpopular opinion right now, but I will elaborate. But do I think he is the Giants franchise quarterback for that specific team in this system? I do. I think he absolutely works with what Brian Daboll wants. He's a smart kid. He makes good decisions. But I just think overall franchise, we have to realize what we just watched, right? Let's I know we just watched a big standalone playoff game. I can tell you, I probably watched like 2 Giants games all season. And both of them, Daniel Jones didn't really impress me. It was just this one. And they were playing the worst defense, passing defense in the NFL. I mean, how many guys were wide open running across the field? It was, masterclass play calling. But I mean, and credit to the receivers too. I mean, they're not big names whatsoever, but Isaiah Hodgins, yeah, he had a really good game. He was getting open. But Laura, how many high level, tight window throws did Daniel Jones even attempt in this game? Maybe 3. I can't count that much. It didn't seem like, every route, was a predetermined. This guy will get open by the action on this side of the field. Like there was a play to Saquon where he kind of went out of the backfield and they had the entire rest of the receivers going across the other side of the field. And he was wide open. I mean, you have to make that throw. But to Daniel Jones' credit, he did make the throws that he needed to. He was perfect in this game, execution-wise, no turnovers, leading on the running game a lot to just carry some drives. And you need that. Some drives, they're playing good defense, and you to get out of the pocket and just extend drives. That's huge. So I think he's good for this team. But I'm very interested to see how he looks next week against an Eagles defense, which is a lot better on the pass side and on the rushing side. To test him. Now, if he balls out against them, then my opinion will completely change. I'll admit that right now. But as it stands right now, I think, because he's extension eligible, this contract season for him, I think right now, after that game, he earned himself $30 million. If he beats the Eagles and has a good performance, add $10 million to that. And if he loses, maybe subtract 3.
No, Lewis, I think for sure with this game, he earned himself $100 million contract for sure in New York.
I'll give you that.
But, everyone likes to highlight the big offensive plays, right? The offensive players, they put up 31 points in the Vikings. But I want to flip it over to the other side of the ball, Lewis. I have not seen many people talk about this. Justin Jefferson, can we equivocally say he got shut down in that game, Lewis?
Yeah, outside of the first drive, he basically got
shut down, Lewis. And you hold the Vikings to 24 points on the road when you know that stadium is rocking. Scold!
I hate that noise so much.
And holding that team to 24 points, Lewis, I know everyone can say Kirk Cousins prime time, this and that, but for that defense, Lewis, not many people are going to talk about it. For them to hunker down and hold them to 24 points, stop the run, and force, Kirk Cousins to make some tight throws. It was really the defense who was the X factor in that game. And hats off to the, the defensive staff over there. No one's going to talk about them. Everyone's going to be talking about Daniel Jones and his big runs and his, great throws. But it was a credit to that defense who was holding the Vikings to 24 points. And it's going to take that similar performance, shutting down those big plays to the receivers, because you're matched up against AJ Brown and Devonta Smith next week and Miles Sanders. Then, if we see another performance like this, Lewis, the defense is, the guys who should be really getting paid.
Yeah, that's a good point, Laraib. They do have a lot, underrated defensive staff. Wink Martindale, he's a very eccentric human being, but, his defensive play call, it worked to perfection. Just blitz the hell out of Kirk Cousins, make him make quick decisions. And that's what we saw on that last play, the pivotal play of the game on that 4th and 10. Instead of, throwing past the sticks, trying to, throw up a contested catch, Kirk Cousins just checks it down to TJ Hawkinson. And I guess he thought TJ Hawkinson had more space than he did. But right when TJ Hawkinson caught that ball, he was immediately tackled. Great game plan by the Vikings overall. I think Kirk Cousins he saw, he didn't want to throw double team to Justin Jefferson. But it just confounds me because we saw a Bills game on the road in which Justin Jefferson made one of the most insane catches of my life on 4th down to save that game, basically. And you don't trust him in a spot like this? Kirk Cousins is such an infuriating quarterback because I actually think he played a pretty good game, against that Giants defense. I thought he played well enough for them to win it, but then there's just a ceiling with him. There's a ceiling that he just can't get past if he's your starting quarterback because they have the offensive personnel. Yeah, their offensive line kind of got banged up and they weren't as good. and Dalvin Cook has kind of seemed not the same player that we are used to seeing from Dalvin, but everything else was there. Yeah, you could say the defense let him down, and I will say the defense let him down, but at the same time, on that last drive, you have to make those throws and be that player. And I think now, just these immobile quarterbacks, unless your name is Tom Brady, it's so hard on these huge drives when everyone, just goes man, they just rush three, everyone goes man, and if you can't get out of that pocket and make a play, you're a cone. And what are you going to do? So it's infuriating watching Kirk Cousins sometimes, but I think all the credit here goes to the Giants. Brian Daboll is an absolute stud. He probably will win Coach of the Year, but it is what it is. I'm rooting. My heart's rooting for him. My brain is telling me to quit. But I credit to this team. I think going into next game, we'll talk about that in our predictions. But the Giants, they're going to be getting a lot of credit going in. They're a really hot team right now, so we'll see what happens going into next week, Laraib.
Yeah, for sure. But it looks like you talked about a little bit at the end, Lewis. The pocket passer era of quarterbacks might be over as we know it. Even some of these guys who you think can stand tall, Joe Burrow, maybe not seen as a huge runner, but he can still, move around, get some good yards. Of course, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, are just the next coming of the NFL quarterback. And so, like you said, Tom Brady on his way out, Aaron Rodgers on his way out. I know everyone likes to talk about these high flying offenses with, this 6'6" quarterback who can stand tall and start throwing and chucking it deep. We see even Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert can, move a little bit now. So it looks like the league is evolving for sure, Lewis.
Yeah, I want to ask you real quick before we move on to our next game. Would you rather have going forward, or just who would you rather have? Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins as your starting quarterback?
Oh, man, because this is really interesting, Lewis, because, let me just ask you this question. Have we seen Daniel Jones's ceiling?
No, we have not.
Then I have to take Daniel Jones because this, in my opinion, this is Kirk Cousins' ceiling. This is a guy, one of those old school pocket passers who likes to stand tall and, deliver passes. Sometimes he's off. Of course, the lights are always too bright for this guy, Lewis. But Daniel Jones, like you said, maybe this wasn't the hardest task for him to go to Minnesota against their, 30th ranked pass defense and throw some good balls. But we can see, you have a head coach like Brian Daboll who can change the culture and change how he plays football. I got to ride with Daniel Jones on that one.
And also to Daniel Jones' credit, he's throwing to Richie James, Isaiah Hodgins, and Darius Slayton. Like when I say we haven't seen his ceiling yet, if you put him in that Vikings offense, like who knows what he could be with those playmakers on the outside. So I think I'd rather have Daniel Jones just because of the athletic ability. And in these playoff games, rushing the ball, getting those huge first downs in your legs. And like we see on these 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 plays where you need to get an inch, he can get an inch. And we saw guys like Tyler Huntley, we'll get to that, but who just can't really pound it in like that. I think that's becoming a huge factor in some of these games when you need every yard you can get because these teams are playing these deep coverages. So you need a dink and dunk on a lot of these drives, which results in more 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, 4th and inches. And you need a guy, maybe even a gadget guy like a Taysom Hill to just come in and be able to power through. Even if you know it's coming, just his strength to really power through. That's what I liked about Daniel Jones in this Giants offense. But Laraib, let's go ahead and move on to our next game. I want to talk about the Ravens Bengals, but before we really get into the game, the whole Lamar situation, Lamar Jackson, has been so strange, surrounding this game because it was the playoff game. A lot of people thought he'd be back around week 16, but then he kept sitting out. And then come the playoff game, we're like, all right, you have to play in the playoffs, right? And he didn't. And now it's, no one's really talking about it. We see no updates on it. And with his, huge offseason coming up, how much confidence do you have, Laraib, that Lamar will remain a Baltimore Raven come 2023?
Well, Liz, before I want to get into that, I just want to say I completely agree with his decision of not playing in this game. I know a lot of people will say, he should have played, for his guys out there. But we've seen guys have knee injuries like RG3, for example, whose career is over after, taking more and more beating. Andrew Luck, all the beatings that he took in Indianapolis, he had to retire early. And so I 100% agree. A lot of people say you got to go out there and play, but I have to agree with this decision.
No, you go out there and play when you have a guaranteed contract. Then you can put it all on the line. Then you can risk your body because if you go out there and have a horrible injury, they're not going to pay your ass. So I completely agree with you, Laraib. Until that contract is guaranteed, that checks in the bank account, then screw him. Don't play. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. But as to his regards of being a Raven next year, Lewis, this is really interesting because we see guys like J.K. Dobbins and Marlon Humphrey after the game talking about how, if he's there, that they win this game, right? Or, Marlon Humphrey saying, he's our guy. We love him to death. He's a locker room guy. And then you have him, not being at the stadium or not attending at the game, Lewis. Nothing coming out of Jim or Harbaugh in this one. Nothing coming out of management or any of the GMs or any of the owners and from this one. So it's a really, really tricky situation, Lewis, because this contract thing has been looming over them all season, Lewis. And it all stems from Deshaun Watson over there and all his guaranteed money, and that is having a huge effect across the NFL. But for this game, my confidence out of 0 to 100, that Lamar Jackson is a Raven next year. I have to put it at a score of 50-50, Lewis. I mean, it could go either way, in my opinion.
I'm lower than that. I really don't think he returns as a Raven. I'm going to say it's about a 35% chance he does return. My thinking is, from what I've seen from the Baltimore's front office and some of the moves they've made, extending, Roquan Smith, giving him a, highest paid linebacker contract, which he deserves. He's a great player. And we'll get into the game in a little bit. I just want to talk about this because this is going to be the last time we talk about the Ravens this season. But for Lamar, if they come at you this offseason with a, what's it called? Franchise tag?
Franchise tag.
If they come out with a franchise tag, then you don't sign that. You deny that and you move on. I mean, because guaranteed the franchise tag is not going to pay you as much. There are teams lining up. I can guarantee you, the Jets, the Falcons. I bet both of our teams would love a Lamar on their team.
The Lions.
Right. There's so many teams. I don't know. Jared Goff's kind of him. But no, the Lions too. Yes, there's so many teams that would love a Lamar Jackson on their team, just waiting for the Ravens to screw this up. And we've seen what the Ravens are without Lamar. So I think they need to pay him. They need to give him everything he deserves. Fully guaranteed contract, similar to Deshaun Watson, similar to Kyler Murray. He's earned it. He deserves it. And we see what this team is without him. Obviously, you see players like J.K. Dobbins coming out frustrated, saying that if we had Lamar, we would have won. And I agree with him. I completely agree with him, Laraib. And let's talk about this game now, where we both picked the Bengals. But I told you this Ravens defense was legit. They would keep this game close. And my best bet of the week was Ravens +8 because I knew this game would be close. Now, it was a 7-point game at the end, but there was a 14-point swing on one play, and everyone knows what I'm talking about, when Tyler Huntley from the 2-yard line thought he was Cam Newton and tried jumping over the line just for Logan Wilson to knock it out of his hands and Sam Hubbard pick it up like it was handed to him and run 98 yards for the defensive touchdown, which basically iced the game because there were some awful clock management and late game decisions by the Ravens and John Harbaugh that was confusing, and the Bengals ended up limping out of there with a victory to go to Buffalo. But let's talk about the Ravens in this game. I think the Ravens thoroughly outplayed the Bengals. I think if this game was played 10 times, the Ravens would honestly win 7 of them. I think that when you lose 3 of your starting offensive linemen for the Bengals, it clearly showed and affected how the Bengals wanted to play. They couldn't run the ball, and they could not, Joe Burrow could not sit in that pocket for more than 2 seconds without having to get the ball away or get sacked, because that Ravens defense is ferocious. Now, a good thing for the Bengals that in my opinion, the Ravens defense is the best in the league. I think it's better than the 49ers defense. Now they're out of the way. Now you get to focus on the Bills and Chiefs defenses, which are very overrated, but we'll get to that later. Bad thing is, so you lose your left tackle. He might be back, and you're already down 2 offensive linemen. Laura, what was your biggest takeaway from the Sunday night's game?
The biggest takeaway was that this Bengals team, at least offensively, was looking how they were 2 years ago. We saw Joe Burrow getting sacked at a historical rate, like you were saying.
Last year. That was him last year, too.
Well, last year, the offensive line, was a little bit better than 2 years ago. Whenever he had that really bad ACL injury, it would just look abysmal. And like you said, that was the key for them. Not from last year. The offensive line, of course, this year is way better. But from last year, just getting that little bit much better was great for them. And now you're back to where you started a little bit. It's going to be really, really tough for this team, Lewis. But like you mentioned, this Bills team, the defense did not look that awesome. And for the Chiefs throughout the season, they got some great, edge rushers and Frank Clark. and our boy Chris Jones, and we'll see how the offensive line can hold up, Lewis. But for this Bengals team, it's going to be continuing to play, through your playmakers and Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase. Those guys were outstanding there. And that's what it's going to really take for this team to, continue on in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll figure it out because this team just has a really good identity. I think the Bengals defense did play very well. They just, the Ravens really could not move the ball outside of a few crazy plays where one, Eli Apple just getting murdered in single coverage. That's a little bit, that's 60% on Eli, but also the blitz they sent should have gotten home. There's no reason it should have gotten home. He just also got toasted. So, it is what it is with Eli Apple, that bum.
Former
But
Saint.
I think for the Ravens' sake, Laura, I think you don't disagree with me. If Lamar played in that game, I think the Ravens win it. I think they left a lot on the table. But credit to Tyler Huntley. Tyler Huntley played a pretty good game. Threw for 200 plus yards. He had a few bad, mistakes. Obviously, the huge red zone fumble and interception early in the game that led to Bengals points. But I think Lamar absolutely changes this game if he's playing in it, and they do win. So that's why pressure on the Ravens front office is going to be huge this offseason for the decision they make. You either have to pay him or you move on. I don't think you can play this middling game where you throw contracts at him because he will leave and you're just wasting years of your franchise right now.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. And another thing, going back to Lamar, like you said, he could go to some of these other teams like the Jets. And guess what they have, Lewis? They have a number one wide receiver in Garrett Wilson. You can go to the Lions. Guess what, Lewis? They have a number one wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Meanwhile, you're playing with DeMarcus Robinson and Sammy Watkins, who you signed to your, team, just a couple of weeks ago, Lewis. And so for Lamar, his main guy has been Mark Andrews the entire time he's been there. But, it's only Mahomes and Kelsey who can dominate with just a tight end.
Right.
And so, for Lamar, if he plays, I think, I'm sure for sure they win that game. Just his dynamic just changes the whole game. Tyler Huntley, he can run the ball well, but just Lamar Jackson's connection with Mark Andrews in that one could have made a huge difference, especially on that last drive, Lewis. But that's not what happened. The Bengals are moving on in this one, Lewis, and now they have to go to Buffalo. That's gonna be a great rematch this time in Buffalo, Lewis. Really, really strange how all that came out to be. Because if the Bengals win that game, potentially this is another one in Cincinnati. But that's water under the bridge now, Lewis. Let's move on to the team that will be facing in Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills, Lewis. And now that game was a lot closer than we really expected. I was going to dub that game the bloodbath of Buffalo, but really that Dolphins team was able to exploit, Lewis, what the Bills were doing. And Josh Allen, man, just those really, really bad turnovers. We talked about this earlier in the season about him in the red zone throwing really bad interceptions. Trying to force the ball down deep. And of course, fumbling issues when he's trying to just too much or do too much up in the pocket, Lewis. And now these two teams will face off. Lewis, what do you think the Bills can, build off of from this week to, maybe give themselves a better shot against the Bengals next week?
Well, the biggest thing is the pressure they got on Skylar Thompson, which they should translate to what we talked about with the Bengals offensive line. But we'll get into that more. I want to focus on this game specifically and some of the issues I saw with Buffalo that concern me. What concerns me about Buffalo right now, and I'll kind of defer to you on Josh Allen because I want to focus on this defense for a second. And the Damar Hamlin situation's obviously it's awful, but it's settled now. It feels better, so we can talk about this without feeling like pieces of shit. Excuse me, poop. But Damar Hamlin, he was filling in for Jordan Poyer. Or Micah Hyde, excuse me, and he's out too. So you're down two starting safeties. And Damar Hamlin, he was solid, but now you're down two starting safeties in a already pretty leaky secondary, which we saw was getting exposed by Skylar Thompson. Yes, the Dolphins have really good receiving options, but there were guys getting wide open. Gesicki in the back of the end zone was wide open. Jalen Waddle was getting free all over the field. And, how are you going to expect to contain some of the Cincinnati weapons coming next week if you can't contain Skylar Thompson and this Dolphins offensive line, which really isn't much better than the ramshackle Bengals offensive line? So there's some big concerns for me for Buffalo coming up. And like you said, we're kind of alluding to the offensive side of the ball. There are just too many mistakes. Red zone mistakes by Josh Allen. The fumbles were really bad in this one, especially the one in the end zone for the touchdown for the Dolphins. There were just a lot of things that I really did not like from the Bengals or Bills offense. I still don't think they can run the ball that well. The Dolphins just really don't have that good of a run defense. So James Cook had a few big runs in this game. But like you said, this game looked really ugly early. And what we kind of saw with the Chargers too is when you don't have that running game to put teams away, you have these frantic finishes where you're just, trying to survive your hardest to hold on and finish the game. And this team's come playoff time, you're not going to be able to do that against some of these running football teams who are just going to choke you out. But the good thing about this AFC, no one can run the ball except for kind of Jacksonville. Jacksonville is the best rushing team in the AFC. But if you go into the Super Bowl against San Francisco or against Dallas or against Philadelphia, get ready for a load of running because that's what you're going to get. That's why I think the weakness for the Bills is right now, Laraib. And that's what concerns me going forward because they're not as unbeatable as I thought they were going into this game.
Yeah, Lewis, with all those turnovers, against Miami, giving the ball to Skylar Thompson in the red zone is a lot different than turning over to a Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow in the red zone, Lewis. And so, it's going to be a big, big struggle for this team. Like I said earlier, Josh Allen had these issues throughout his career. It was really, really bad during this season. And, he injured his PCL, Lewis, against the Jets. And we thought, he's come back from that a little bit. We've seen some really, really errant throws out of him, especially in the red zone. And he's going to have to button that all up if this Bills team is going to live up to their potential, especially in the past couple of seasons when they bring in Sean McDermott. You have Josh Allen, just his development, just the development he had with Brian Daboll. And now it's really going to come down to this, Lewis. This is where, you are what you are. If you're going to face against the Bengals team who has a, really good defense, Lewis, but they're, missing Chidobe Awuzie and, Eli Apple's out there, it's going to come on Josh Allen. You're going to have to make smart decisions, not, force balls anywhere, not hold on to balls for too long. Don't be grappling with the balls all the time, Lewis. And so for this Josh Allen-led Bills team, I'm afraid for them, Lewis, because Patrick Mahomes, he's out there lurking, and he has, in my opinion, a second bye this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he'll be well rested for the AFC Championship.
All right, well, I think I know where you're leaning in that one, but not to tip my hand.
I dare you to pick the Jaguars.
Not to tip my hand, but we'll get into that in our next episode. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode, Laraib. We talked in all the games, all the big, storylines coming out of this weekend. Obviously, we have a huge game coming up tonight. So we're going to drop this episode, watch that game, and give you our instant reaction right after the game ends. And then, of course, our divisional round predictions will be coming up on Thursday, so you can expect that as well. We've been super excited for this whole playoffs. It's been amazing so far, and we can't wait to keep going. So anything else you want to say before we hop out of here,
just
Rob?
Happy MLK Day to everybody. And, of course, then the spring semester starts on Tuesday, so good luck to everybody with that. And I think that is a First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.